This podcast is made on the lands of the Pambalong clan of the Awabakal people, and we acknowledge elders past and present. In 1965, the University of Newcastle opened its doors with a vision of making tertiary education accessible to those in its region. Fast forward to today, and the university now has more than 200,000 alumni who have made a difference all over the world. Welcome to Leading Conversations, a series bringing you stories from our alumni, the people who've shaped and been shaped by the University of Newcastle. In our 7th episode, Vice-Chancellor Alex Zelinsky sits down with proud University of Newcastle alum and founder of Tarform, Kravtchouk. Tarform is an innovative company based in New York that builds hand-built, sustainable electric motorcycles.
Hello, Taras, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Alex. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So it's great to have you. And I guess that, when we look back, you've been graduated just over 20 years ago, so your 20th anniversary. 2017, you founded Tarform, which is an innovative, eco-friendly motorcycle company. And tell us a little bit about this venture and what makes you so excited about it and proud about it.
As a kid, I was interested in making things. It was the aspect of having an idea and then turning it into reality. But I also was interested in machines. So I was a car guy. I had posters of cars when I was a kid. It was a Lamborghini Countach, Lamborghini Diablo. So something in me, was always interested in just aesthetics and form, the language of form and emotion. But also what kid is not interested in supercars, right? Especially the ones from the 80s. Eventually ended up in motorcycles because I felt that it's one of the few products that basically touches on all of the things that interest me, giving shape to something. So the aesthetics part, the design part, it has the engineering challenge. It has the storytelling aspect, manufacturing aspect, the supply chain aspect. Dove right into it without really understanding or mapping out the landscape fully. I guess the idea came about around 2017, and at that point, Tesla started to become a thing. But at that point, I didn't really see anything happening in the two-wheeled space when it comes to electrification. So naturally, seeing that the whole automotive world is being transformed, I didn't see that happening in the motorcycle space. And at that point, I had a garage in Brooklyn. I was working on vintage motorcycles, and they're loud and oily and gas and the whole thing. So for me, it felt very obvious that this is the next product that needs to be electrified. There were a few companies that already did electric motorcycles. I didn't find them inspiring. It felt like they just took an existing motorcycle and put an electric battery in it. But for most people who ride a motorcycle, is such a personal vehicle. It's very few people ride a motorcycle to get from point A to point B. People drive a car to get someplace, but people ride a motorcycle to feel the experience. So I felt that here's an opportunity not just to create a commuter, but to create kind of a new style of a motorcycle that pays homage to the classic cafe racer from the 1970s, sort of revive the iconic spirit of what a motorcycle used to be, but do it through the lens of technology and sustainability. So making it electric was an obvious thing. And obviously being inspired by Tesla and their go-to-market, we decided, well, let's start in the sort of premium positioning space and build a luxury brand and really build the best possible motorcycle we could with the best components and high quality materials, a lot of handmade components and so on. So that was our inception. And we said, well, let's build machines that do absolutely no harm to the environment. Why? Well, because I think humanity has caused enough harm to the environment in the last 50 to 100 years. So if I choose to bring something to the world that is made out of things, and these things are extracted from Earth, I believe it is our responsibility to first develop an awareness where this stuff comes from and what happens to it end of life. We were building our first prototype. I'm like, there's got to be better ways to make these things. Why are we still using petroleum-based vinyls, that apparently take 300 years, and most of them end up in a landfill in Africa, just out of sight from the modern economy, So can we replace this piece of plastic, ABS plastic, with something more sustainable? And we developed a couple of biomaterials made out of flaxseed and algae carbon and so on. And then that became part of our story. And a lot of people are like, oh, cool, plant-based motorcycles. And we did seats out of cactus, and New York Times wrote an article, motorcycles made out of pineapple leather, So in a way, it was kind of a gimmick. But then we noticed, this is interesting. Like, the industry resonating. And then we saw a couple of other big OEMs started making upholstery out of plant-based materials. And that for me kind of widened my perception even more, like, oh, interesting. So if we did something that people kind of ridiculed, and you can prove that it's possible, that other people might follow as well. And the impact we would make, not in a few dozen motorcycles, but to show that there are other ways to make things. And to this day, we try to balance that line between making something that is possible and go away from sort of standard conventions, while at the same time making something that we can put on the road.
Well, let's go back to a little bit to the beginning. So before coming to the University of Newcastle, you were living and studying in Sweden. So what made an international student from Sweden, which is kind of, I think, always kind of been a cool kind of place for design, the Scandinavian style I always think of, of Sweden. And you could have probably studied design there, but you came all the way across the world to study here at the University of Newcastle. Can you tell me a little bit about that decision and what motivated you to come?
Sweden is, everything's great. It's a very comfortable country. It's beautiful. But sometimes it's a little boring. At my university in Sweden, one of my friends told me there's an opportunity to go to Australia and finish your degree there, because both universities had sort of an exchange program. And I thought about it. I'm like, sounds good. The image I had of Australia was completely different than when I arrived to Australia. I don't know if it was a calling to say yes, but out of my entire school, it was just me and one more person. We were the only ones that ended up in Australia. But when we got into Newcastle, we rolled into Civic Station. The first 30 days we spent at a hostel waiting before the semester would start. And we woke up every morning, went to the ocean, and this is June, right? So it's winter and super cold, but it felt still refreshing, and kind of laying down the Australian experience before school started. The university experience itself, it was very unique compared to Sweden, because there was a lot of different people. And Sweden, at that point, there wasn't a lot of diversity, but in Australia, there were people from all over the world. So that also kind of gave me a different insight. Oh, there's people from all over the world that come here, and the education itself, well, I did barely any research on what Bachelor of Visual Communication was. I remember reading the summary. I'm like, sounds good. This sounds in line with what I want to do. But it was much wider than I expected it to be. We had art classes, and we had Flash animation, programming. It felt quite experimental and very non-traditional. And at that point, I was already working as a freelancer for a web agency in Sweden, and it felt like a perfect complement. But it was, it actually felt less like school. It felt more like play. Even in Sweden, before the university, I was on one of the first sort of Swedish experimental directions. It was called creative technology, something like that, in 2000. And at that point, I got introduced to design, and so I got really interested in that. And then I got an internship when I was 16 at a web design agency. So already by the time I began studying in university, I had about 3 years of working experience working with web design. I knew that I need to pair that work experience with a degree, because later when you're an adult, that's usually what other companies are looking for, not just pure work experience, but they also need a degree. But I found that it was a great compliment, because it made school fairly easy, because I had already a couple of years of experience, and that was a significant advantage. I remember there was a professor, I don't remember his last name, but his first name was Roger. And he came from the advertising world. He saw in me something, because I already worked. So we connected on a level that he understood what the professional environment is. And I think he tried to sort of usher me into a direction. The feedback he gave was, at that point, I perceived it as harsh. But in hindsight, it was just honest. But at that point, I was like, oh, I should have gotten higher grades because of this project. And, sometimes you get feedback that you want to hear, and sometimes you get feedback that feels abrasive, but later it lands, and then you realize, that's true. If you're willing to listen. So I didn't have any issues sort of like, oh no, I got to go and work or I have to study. Because I worked with what I studied, it felt like a very seamless environment.
Many students work while they study, but Taras was lucky enough to already be working in his industry before he even graduated. He says this was a strength, as it taught him all about the industry in a way that academia alone couldn't, giving him valuable real-world experience in the workplace. The idea of practical workplace experience is something that remains a passion for Taras, with interns in his Tarform workshop almost always present.
So by the time I got a brief, it was in the morning. I did the work. So we had this perfect sort of cogwheel situation that they never had to wait. But on the point that you mentioned, I couldn't agree more that usually traditional education is very disconnected from the work environment. I try to have 2 to 3 interns at our shop almost all the time. And we work with Pratt University, which is just around the corner, considered one of the best design schools in US, as well as Parsons, Rhode Island School of Design are bringing their students to our shop all the time to sort of show this is how you build hardware. This is how you apply, sustainable design and whatnot. So for me, it's a very personal and passionate side of what I do is to get the younger generation inspired and kind of widen their perception of what are the skills relevant for you to know today. It's fascinating to see some kids they understand the value of learning things early in a professional work environment, like actually getting their hands dirty, and sometimes I've met engineers that fully graduated and they don't know how to use a hammer. For me, it's amazing that you can study 5 years of how to build things and you don't know how to use a hammer. Literally, we had an intern. I'm like, no, this is how you hold it and you bang it, so there's that partnership that you mentioned is so important, I believe. The friend that I actually moved to Australia with bought a motorcycle after we moved back from Australia. And he bought a Kawasaki. I think it was a Kawasaki. It was like a classic cruiser bike. It was not a beautiful machine and it was not a thing you would hang on your wall. It was just a loud, obnoxious motorcycle. And initially I'm like, well, why did you get this thing? This doesn't make sense. Like, motorcycles are dangerous. They're loud. I didn't have any connection to this thing. And then as he started riding it more and more, I kind of started getting warmer to it and felt comfortable in the presence of this loud dinosaur. And then at some point, he's like, you want to go for a ride? And we were out in the Swedish countryside. And I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? But I don't know how to ride. I don't have a motorcycle license. He's like, oh, don't worry. He showed me how to shift. And I remember getting on this thing and I'm terrified, twist the throttle, try to shift it. And then after a few minutes, I get the hang of it. And that experience of just gliding in the Swedish countryside and you're sitting on this big rumble thing, it's like most motorcycle people would say that's a core memory the first time they have the motorcycle experience. And I was hooked, and after that, I'm like, I get it. This is, all the cliche movies. This is what they're talking about. So next day I went to the equivalent of like Craigslist in Sweden, which is where you buy secondhand things. And I found this custom Yamaha from the 1980s. And this guy had modified it. So he turned it into a bobber where he chopped off some parts and components. And it was a beautiful bike. And it captured me. I bought it. I didn't even have a license. And I took it over to my house and I'm sitting looking at it and I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to repaint it. So I started taking it apart and I had absolutely no understanding of the mechanics of it, how an internal combustion engine works, what suspension is. But I got this sense like I need to put my personal touch. It was a red bike and I wanted to make it black. So I took the tank off, I rattle can sprayed it. But just that element of like, wow, I turned this bike from red to black was enough to get me interested in building motorcycles.
Well, it's great to hear that you take interns. I at some point, it might even ask, or we make an introduction and may even consider taking someone from Newcastle back to New York. Let's get back to Tarform and that idea that you got into motorcycles because you liked repairing them. But I guess what inspired you to go and buy your first motorcycle and then learn? Because you just said to me that you were a design guy. How did you kind of get into that whole technical hardware space and that whole business of motorcycles?
My dad was an entrepreneur his entire life. So every couple of years he had new projects and he showed me that, yeah, why not go and do the things that you want to do? like come up with a project and go and put it to work, which was fairly unusual in Sweden at that point. So Sweden, 30, I'm 41. So, over 30 years ago, Sweden was a very conformist country. In many ways, it still is. You're not supposed to go a little bit outside the norm. What my dad did was pretty unusual. I remember all my friends' dads, they kind of had their regular jobs at Volvo, Ericsson, the 9 to 5. And my dad was doing these crazy things. So he showed me that there's an opportunity to do things that other people don't, like don't follow the herd, and, all my life, I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I'm just going to do that. If I have an idea, I'm just going to go and try to apply what I know and learn along the way. So before Tarform, I had 6 different startups. Each one of them, I didn't see that as a failure. I just saw it as, oh, wow, it didn't work out. And I think that's a kind of a big thing that I also try to teach the young kids when I do guest critiques and lectures is really don't look at a business as this big monumental endeavor that you have to do and you have to not fail, but see it more as an experiment. And because for sure, your first business will almost always fail. So many people are so afraid to taking that first step because they're afraid to fail. And, in Silicon Valley, there's this whole thing, fail fast. So the Americans have a completely different relationship to failure than Europeans have. And I think Australians are kind of in the middle.
I think you're absolutely right. I was just thinking, as you were saying, where are we on that spectrum? I've been in business myself. I was kind of luckier that my business kind of went okay, but I can see how you can get very close to failing multiple times, even when you actually kind of get through to being kind of a stable company. But it was only about to 2000 that I started to think, I was about your age. I said, maybe I should try to start my own business. And it was an incredibly invigorating time for me. That actually showed me what I really liked about business, what I didn't like. So I certainly learnt that talking to investors and things like that and on the stock exchange and maintaining share prices, that was kind of not what I wanted. I wanted to get back to research and technology, and that's why I kind of got back into sort of research and trying to commercialize research and push it out into the industry to people like you. You kind of talk on I can sense these 2 kind of themes, craftsmanship and sustainability. This is the kind of the core values of Tarform. So you've kind of seeking to to revive the idea of a high quality product, something that's sort of this vintage motorcycles, but taking them into another form. And it's kind of what, I like that look of it. I mean, I'm a bit like you, still am like what you were, scared of motorcycles, but I always admire them. Some of them look very, very cool. But you've sort of taken that element, and now, of course, because of, the carbon, fossil fuel challenge, we've got to move to sort of electric, and you're trying to bring sustainability and craftsmanship together. I think that's what your business is about. So tell me a little bit more about how you've kind of clearly, because you've been going now the business for 10 years, there is a business there. So how do you blend these 2 key ideas, which could be in some way competing in a way, but you've blended them. So tell us a little bit about that.
Like you mentioned, it's a big resistance because there's one thing to sort of stay true to your initial intent and the vision of what you're trying to make, but while at the same time operating under the structure of the modern economy, mass standardization, scale, productivity, right? And the very sort of idea of Tarform in many ways goes against this whole establishment. So, corporations in general, or people in general, haven't had much care or awareness of the things we choose to bring into our life or what happens to them after. And being a designer, you're obviously aware of the materials. You understand the supply chain to a certain degree. But I felt still this lack of, why are we making things that we clearly know are not good for the planet or the people? Not just on a sort of theoretical, intellectual level, but I was working with these materials. I was breathing toxic fumes from paints and primers, chemicals, and I didn't want to be around those things. After we built the first bike, the Luna, we didn't really compromise when it came to the way we were making the bikes, the materials we were using. And we realized that our bill of materials, which is the material cost to actually build this thing, was so high that there was no way for us to lower it to the price point that we expected. So the first prototype cost us maybe 60,000 in materials alone. And initially we advertised this bike for about 25,000, which is still premium pricing it for motorcycles. And we just realized we have to keep it as a handmade, made to order sort of bespoke machine with hand shaped aluminum and 3D printed brass and a lot of machine components. So we said, well, this is simply the object that has to be kind of like the Bugatti of electric motorcycles. And we did that for a couple of years. But then people started asking us, well, this is a cool bike, but it's $50,000. Can you guys make something that looks similar, but slightly more accessible? So we spent about 2 years building a new bike, which we call the Vera. And it's a model that which is less than half the price. So it starts at around 18,000. And it was designed for the urban commuter. So still using a lot of sort of the soul and the spirit of our first bike, but making it more accessible and aimed for volume production. So that bike we hope to scale into possibly a couple of hundreds. It's been incredibly difficult because a lot of investments, a lot of VCs or a lot of investors don't see immediate return and sustainability. And I'm sure, you've seen the whole ESG movement that was also big a couple of years ago. They're like, oh no, this is going to take 10, 15 years. And we don't have time for that. We need 100x return within 3 to 5 years. Yes, but we're trying to do something that's good for humanity, hopefully, over 20, 30 years. And unfortunately, most of the money is not moving into those stories. It moves into IPOs and AI.
But I think that you shouldn't lose heart. I think you're a real leader, I think, in this area of sustainability and actually getting new plant-based products into use in manufacture is a fantastic idea. So, and just takes longer to do these things. As I said, when I was trying to do something new this way, someone said to me, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. So these things take time, but I think you're on the right thing and right track. And the fact that you're sustainable sounds, as a business, sounds very good as well. So you touched on that topic of AI. What about you as a business? Are you using AI to make your motorcycles at all? And what's the role, do you think? They're saying AI is going to take the jobs. I think when you're manufacturing things, it probably doesn't, but may make you more productive, I suspect. But anyway, can you tell us what's happening with AI in your business?
Yeah, I think our case is like many other businesses, that it's just such a transformative force that it's more of a challenge to figure out where your limitations in imagination are and how do you apply this tool. For us specifically, it hasn't really contributed directly to the product development when it comes to hardware, because I think that's one of the last frontiers for AI to cross, is to actually start making CAD design or making PCB board layout. So when it comes to electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, not much. But when it comes to software engineering, it has completely transformed our workflow. We're able to deploy so much code and so many new features on the bikes. And the bikes are essentially, at the end of the day, they're computers on wheels, right? It's all electrons flowing through wires. So I think in the last 3 to 4 months, have gone through a tech debt, a backlog of features we wanted to build that we had for 3 years, and just bang it out. So
it's making you more productive. So rather than, I no longer need any software engineers, I just do this. So this is, I think, I think that's what I like when people talk about AI, is this idea that there won't be jobs in software engineering. In fact, there will be, except you'll be far more productive and can do much, much more.
I agree. I think, yes, I see it from other companies and other entrepreneurs that are increasing their productivity. And an engineer that spent, 8 hours writing code doesn't have to do that anymore. He can have much more productivity and output, but also level up to think, instead of being in a very siloed sort of task, he can start thinking in systems and processes and start to directing this incredible tool. I mean, I see it as a tool still. Maybe in a couple of years it's going to be different, but who knows?
For Taras, a curiosity about motorcycles became something much bigger. It taught him a lesson that still guides him today. The more willing you are to learn, the easier it becomes to step into new opportunities.
For me personally, it was follow your curiosity. And many times I felt I wasn't ready. But I would say most of the meaningful opportunities in my life came because I said yes, even though I felt that I don't really have the skills or the capability to do that. And once you sort of say yes, well, then you've committed to the thing, and then you need to develop the skill set and the competence to actually execute this thing. But more on a practical level, especially in today's world, right, where every sort of sector is being displaced or threatened by AI. The biggest advice I usually give is don't try to narrow yourself too much into a certain specialization, but develop an ability how to learn. And if you develop an ability to learn, well, you can apply that into any discipline. Learn how to communicate. I don't think that's a thing that's going to be displaced by AI. Learn how to work with people. Constantly question your own beliefs and don't get too married to your ideas. Yeah, just like, the name Tarform in Swedish means taking shape, and the philosophy that nothing is ever in its final form. And that's the way I try to live my life, is everything is in the constant state of motion and evolution, and just keep moving.
Wonderful, Taras. It's been wonderful to talk to you today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. You're a great alumnus of our university. I think we can be very proud of a man who's gone off and founded this company, Tarform, which I think creates the world's best electric motorcycles that are also sustainable and are beautiful. So I think, what could we say other than congratulations on your career and what you're doing, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thanks so much, Alex. My pleasure.
This was Leading Conversations with University of Newcastle Vice-Chancellor Alex Zelinsky, talking with founder of Tarform and proud graduate of the University of Newcastle, Taras Kravtchouk. This podcast was recorded on Awabakal land at the University of Newcastle's Callaghan campus. To hear more stories from inspiring leaders, be sure to tune in to the next episode featuring Mark Aubrey, CEO of RB Amir Aradija. Until then, this was Leading Conversations with University of Newcastle Vice-Chancellor Alex Zelinsky.